Good afternoon and welcome to today's Assembly Committee on Labor and Employment for this Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. Today, it looks like we're not quite at quorum yet, one shy, so we'll commence as a subcommittee. When we arrive at quorum, we'll pause, take roll, and secure quorum. So with that, I'd like to invite Senator Wolk to be the first to present on Senate Bill 730. Senator Harper just walked in. I think we might be able to secure quorum at this time. So, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Hernandez.
Present.
Harper.
Present.
Chu. Here. Lowe. McCarty. Patterson. Thurman.
Quorum is established. Welcome, Senator Wolk. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. 730 would protect communities by requiring trains and light engines carrying freight within California to be operated with an adequate crew size for both public safety reasons and the protection of railroad workers. 730 prohibits a train or light engine hauling freight from being operated in California unless it has a crew consisting of at least 2 individuals. It authorizes the California PUC to assess civil penalties at its discretion against anyone who willfully violates this prohibition. California has over 6,000 miles of railroad track that crisscrosses the state through both urban and wilderness areas. Today's freight trains carry extremely dangerous materials that pose significant health hazards and safety risks to our communities and our environment in the case of an accident. The potential for derailment or other accident containing these materials is ever-present danger. 730 is not a magic bullet, but it complements different efforts at the federal level and at our own level and local levels to improve rail safety and preparedness. With me today is Timothy Smith with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, and Paul King with the PUC. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just to be fair on both sides, I want to announce what the rules are on the witness testimony. I'm going to limit 3 on witnesses on each side, support and oppose, at 2 minutes each. So I encourage you to please manage your time accordingly. So with that, your first witness, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tim Smith. I'm the state chairman of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, Teamsters Rail Conference. We felt that this particular bill was very important to bring forward. It comes with national attention. Our national decided that it was time that we make sure that we keep the crews that we have now. 98% of the trains that operate within this state and throughout the nation operate with at least 2 people in the cab. It's a safety bill. It has nothing to do with jobs or anything else. It's a safety bill for the public, for the environment, and for the safety of the employees that work in this particular industry. I've been a locomotive engineer and still am a certified licensed locomotive engineer for going on 44 years now. Seen a lot of changes over the railroads, and I do remember there was a time going over Donner Summit where we had up to 7 crew members for a train. We've seen that pared down to the bare bones minimum, and that minimum is where we're at right now with 2 members, the conductor and the locomotive engineer. They're both federally licensed and certified employees now. They didn't used to be. So there must have been some importance there to federally certify them simply because the Federal Railroad Administration's deemed it necessary to have the quality people that they've got. And we do have some great quality people. So I just would like to reiterate that I've seen it all before. I've worked this mountain. I've worked up and down the valley. I think about the potential for one person in the cab doing all the things that need to be done on a train, handling the orders, dealing with the train, dealing with the power, dealing with all of the situations that constantly arise. Doing all of this all by yourself. I've gone down the valley with fog so bad that you couldn't see the signal till it was next to your window, and you're going top speed too. I mean, that's kind of part of the rules. They want to get the freight over the road no matter what the weather conditions are. So an extra set of eyes, especially in a circumstance like that, would be very beneficial. Snow over the mountains. I've been stalled up on the side of a mountain. I can't imagine working 12 hours and getting stuck up there on the side of the mountain because I'm not allowed to proceed. Or if my train breaks down, I've got nobody up there, nobody to talk to. For all I know, I'm going to be frozen to some switch somewhere before they ever find me. But there are huge responsibilities. The trains are getting bigger and bigger every year. The railroads are pushing the envelope with 2 to 3 mile long trains that weigh anywhere from 10 to 20,000 tons. The engineer up there is in charge of not only the head end power, but what we call distributed power, which is located in the middle of those big trains, as well as a distributive unit or power unit on the rear of the train. So we've got screens everywhere to look at now, and it's amazing that we can even look out the window to see where we're going. So the technology is sort of taken over. But we are doing our level best to do our job the best way we can, and I think we do an exemplary job. But we need help, and we need that conductor over there to help us do that. So with that, I ask for your aye vote, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good morning. I'm Paul King, Deputy Director for the Office of Rail Safety, Safety and Enforcement Division, California Public Utilities Commission. And as you know, the Commission has formally supported Senator Woke's bill, and I'm here to elaborate on that support a bit. Just from my background, I have 45 years in the rail industry, one capacity, the other 10 years as a freight brakeman and conductor on what now is a Bakken crude oil route. I've been at the PUC in various capacities and currently oversee 3 programs: rail crossings, railroads, and rail transit. Currently, I'm the state's representative on RSAC, the federal committee that's been referenced in some of the discussions here, where they took on developing a federal rule in negotiations. It didn't go anywhere, and the FRA withdrew it. It's not being considered in that RSAC committee. The fundamental reason is a redundancy. It's a safety principle that just goes to the core of all safety. For example, nuclear power plants have at least 2 cooling systems, independent cooling systems. Redundancy. Pilots, there's 2 pilots on an airplane. It's the same principle here. You don't want to rely on a single point that could fail. I've read through the both sides of this, and I've looked at all the arguments pro and con. I do not see anything that can replace the need for a second person on a train. And I have a strong background in organizational psychology research, decision making for safety as well. And I understand research, and I've looked at this. I do not see anything, including positive train control, that can replace. You want redundancy. You don't want to have rely on a backup system. You want to have a primary system and a backup system. And there's also been argument about how this is a labor issue for feather bedding, which is a pejorative term. This doesn't have anything to do with feather bedding. This is safety. This is a critical safety component. It should not be negotiated between only labor and management, because that's mostly economic. The public is not at that table. The public representatives, such as yourselves, are not at that table. So that's why that I'm here to urge your support for Senator Woke's bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Shane Gussman on behalf of the California Teamsters Public Affairs Council in support of the bill. Just make a couple quick points. One, this bill simply maintains the status quo. It doesn't create any new jobs for us or any other union or anybody else. There's already 2 people on the train. The railroads recognize that this is for safety, and the bill simply maintains that safety standard. Number 2, there's nothing in federal law or state law that preempts SB 730 from being enacted. Federal law recognizes that states have the ability to regulate railroad safety, and this bill simply does that. The opponents have mentioned again and again Prop 17, which was enacted in 1964. This bill does not conflict with Prop 17. Prop 17 had to do with 2 specific type of personnel on the train. This bill does not deal with those personnel. Those personnel have long been eliminated. And the plain meaning of Prop 17, the plain language to it, mentions the federal law or collective bargaining agreements that would conflict with state law. There aren't any in existence. So this doesn't conflict with Prop 17. You're perfectly within your rights to enact this bill, and we urge you to do so.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, all those wishing to add support as an add-on, at this time you would simply be giving your name of organization, and your position on the bill.
Mr. Chairman and members, Mike Anderson with the United Transportation Union represent the conductors who ride on the train on the safety team, and we urge your support.
Thank you.
Michael Young on behalf of the California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Ryan Snow, Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers. I urge your support. Thank you.
Sean Morgan, also with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, part of the Teamsters Rail Conference, and I ask for a vote of aye on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Louis Costa, for the last 18 years, I've been a conductor on the BNSF Railroad. And for the safety of my brothers and sisters and the safety of the general public and the communities that we run through, we urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to add their support? Okay, here in Encina, at this time, we'll take it to the opposition. Those who are wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward. 3 witnesses, 2 minutes each. When you're ready, we're ready to hear from you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members, committee, Senator Walt.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Don Matty with BNSF Railway Company. We respectfully but strongly disagree with our labor partners who have proposed this legislation. They have been going from state to state. There's various states that have been considering this legislation to require 2 crew. And the option here that has to be decided today is whether we are going to continue to work within the federal process, which Mr. King mentioned, the federal framework, which has led, as of last year, to the safest railroad in the history of the railroad system. We have worked, and 2013 was the safest before that. So we have a very successful process at the federal level. The federal level has primarily the Federal Railroad Administration and administrators conducting industry as well as labor as well as public fora that discuss all kinds of different issues that deal with safety, and they resolve those issues in a collaborative way, in a non-confrontational way, and they come up with solutions. At this point, Mr. King is right. He was on the RSAC for this particular issue of 2 crew, but at this point, the Federal Railroad Administration has submitted a 2 crew regulation, which sits right now in the Office of Management and Budget in the Obama administration for decision. So that's where we're at the federal level. There is a 2 crew. It has a lot more details than just saying there has to be 2 crew on the train as far as what we've been told. Those are not publicly released until the president or the OMB has decided to release them. But that is pending right now at the federal level. I think that the problem, or our company thinks that the problem with this bill is that when you move away from this negotiated process and you start mandating at the state level to decide, you're missing all kinds of different factors that are considered at the federal level. For one, there is a process, the process in place now considers railroad economics and the changing nature of the U.S. economy and transportation system. And with all respect to the analysis that was done for this committee, and this is the only committee this bill will be heard in the assembly side, that analysis is not able to be done. It's a great analysis when it comes to the particular labor issue and collective bargaining, but it is not a good analysis in terms of economics of railroads, changing nature of the U.S. economy and the transportation system, the physical plant and the technology that's being utilized in the system, and railroad employment trends and labor management are addressed, but those are the things that are addressed at the federal level with industry, labor, public participation, and many people within the federal administration. As far as Proposition 17 goes, we do have an argument about Proposition 17, and a recent legal opinion that came from the sponsors' attorneys that they just came out with a couple days ago, that legislative opinion says that if SB 730 was passed and a collective bargaining agreement was agreed to in the future, that 730 would be overridden. It says it in their analysis. So to testify in this sense that that there is no force of Proposition 17 from 1964, and Proposition 17 from 1964 said that the state legislature does not have command over the train crew issue anymore. That's what it said, and it was the reason for that was to implement some federal awards, but it was also to avoid strikes, and that's why that legislation was there. So Legislative Council in another bill, similar bill back in 1999, agrees with that position, that the legislature does not have authority to act in this area. We have a very strong record of safety in the railroads. We want to testify in all cases how safe the railroads are and how safe they become because of this collaborative effort. And we hope that you will oppose this bill today and send it back to the federal process where we've been very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Olin. I'm Assistant Vice President of Labor Relations for Union Pacific Railroad. And my purpose here today is to really speak to you about the collective bargaining process and the ramifications that this initiative would have upon those efforts and the comprehensiveness of those negotiations when it comes to matters such as crew size. As a matter of background, it's important to emphasize here that the collective bargaining agreement process, that when they address these types of issues, is not a half-handed initiative or effort. We're bound by a set of labor laws known as the Railway Labor Act, which covers only railroads and airlines. It is completely different from the rest of American industry. One of the things that it requires us to do is to maintain the status quo throughout the tenure of our negotiations regarding a particular issue. As such, you don't see a promulgation of work rule changes or a slam dunking of something like, say, a single-person crew operation without first reaching an agreement. The result of that is it forces the parties to be very thoughtful and thorough with respect to the topics they cover in their negotiations and the manner in which they cover them. Because we have to maintain the status quo, we don't get very many chances to make the change. Change comes very slowly, and we have to be thorough, and we are. When you look, in my 30 years in this particular discipline, I've only seen a reduction from 5 people on a crew down to the 2 we have today. But in that, that has been accomplished through the collective bargaining agreement process, and it has not in any way sacrificed safety. When you look at the impressive gains that the industry has made in the safety environment, in the safety arena, there can be no question that this is a process that works. The other point I wish to make today is when you think about the requirements of the Railway Labor Act and how we deal with our union counterparts, one of the things that the Railway Labor Act does is it presents and gives both parties a level playing field. And in my earnest belief, passing a statute, a requirement like this would unlevel, if you let me use that term, unlevel the playing field, that it would give an unfair advantage to one side or the other and would not allow or would not permit us to do the necessary due diligence, to do the necessary work that we have to do in these negotiations to address issues of the like of crew size. So with that, I would simply close on urging you that this is not something that would be beneficial to the parties and would have a very chilling effect on our ability to work with our unions to address the issues that are relevant to our employees and including to the safety of our operations in California.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next witness. Anyone wishing to add on in opposition? Okay, hearing and seeing none, at this time, we're going to take it back we're going to put it in the hands of the committee. Committee members, any questions or comments? Vice Chair Harper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I take note of Mr. Mattei's comments in terms of the freight safety record that we have that's shown out to be this being the safest year on record for 2014, and of course the previous year setting a safety record as well. And so my concern is that there isn't anything that's being shown or demonstrated from an independent source or academic in terms of how this either helps, hurts, or benefits the current situation, which there's the ability to be able to negotiate over what is the best way to be able to approach this between the railroads, labor, and the federal government, et cetera. And so I'm not persuaded of the need for this law or that this law would indeed create any sort of safer environment for our railroad system.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Assembly Member Patterson, please.
Thank you. Is it in dispute that the safety record of the railroads for freight has improved? Do you dispute that the set of facts with respect to the collective bargaining and the current situation of two people on the train, and over this period of time, that there has been, as a result, very safe railroad traffic? Do you dispute that?
Mr. Minch, through the chair. Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I would like the representative from the PUC to answer that question.
That would be fine.
I dispute the simplistic summary that that the safety record that's been described here tells you what you need to know. All you have to do is look at the newspaper and how these trains are exploding lately, and understand that safety record is based on low threshold accidents that are many, which dominate what makes a trend. But what I think everybody in this room is most concerned with these days are these trains that are exploding dramatically, and there has not seemed to be an end to them yet. So if you were to look at the high consequence accidents, which is what people are always most interested in, I would say that safety record is less than supportive of removing a crew member from the train.
Well, we get into a lot of, and I understand your approach here, but even if you incorporate this different or higher standard, isn't it a fact that the railroads are safer now than they were 5 years ago? And significantly so. Is that not a demonstrable fact?
I think, Mr. Patterson, Assembly Member, I agree with my witness from the CPUC that all you need to do is look at some of these incidents that are happening throughout the country. In particular, I would draw your attention to the Amtrak, the corridor accident. There is a tremendous interest, both in California and throughout the country, in making certain that these trains are equipped with the highest level of technical safety equipment possible, the best and adequate crews, the best emergency response requirements, and the basic principle here is, as my witnesses explained, it's one of redundancy. That's what safety is about. Not one person in the cockpit, but two at all times. And at the moment, we have that situation in California. We aren't preempted from continuing that. We don't want that to change. So it needs to become a statute.
I heard that in the beginning of the presentation. I understand that the present set of circumstances is that we have two people on a train now. That has been a result not of actions by the legislature, but it has been by the collective bargaining. Through the chair to BNSF, I'd like your analysis of safety record. I mean, the fundamental reason, apparently, for the bill, apart from what I think may be an effort to really get into a labor management area here unnecessarily, but is safety. We have freight trains operating at significant higher levels, and we have declining incidents. Is that not a fact? We're getting safer over time.
Yes, Assemblyman Patterson, our record for delivering hazardous materials in the country, BNSF's record, is that we've delivered 99.997% of all of our hazardous materials without an incident. That is an improvement. From the 1980s, we've improved by 40% as far as accidents go. crossings have improved. A lot of this as a result of technology. And what we don't want to do here is we don't want to lock in one particular provision of railroad operations by a state law rather than taking the technology that we learn from and is growing very rapidly in every industry right now. And those technologies have improved rail safety. So what you're going to do is you could lock in one particular provision as opposed to being open to the technology, and those discussions are happening at the federal level. We're more than happy to engage in those at the federal level. We've been engaging them since the 1970 Rail Safety Act. This process has been working, and it's improved safety. So I think the critical issue and the purpose of the bill being safety, we have to look at the record, and there is no evidence that two crew is safer. There's no study out there. There's no study being presented to this committee.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
No, I'm still in
Please.
questioning. Appreciate that. I'd like to turn to the issue of the labor code and all and these essentially what I guess we've seen are conflicting legal opinions. I have the Legislative Council's opinion in front of me, specifically stating that Section 6900.5 of the Labor Code precludes the legislature from enacting a statute that supersedes the provisions of a collective bargaining agreement regulating crewing of railroad trains. My question, if we have these conflicting legal opinions, are we not, in the absence of safety issues and in the presence of collective bargaining that has created two people on a train, are we not essentially inviting litigation instead of safety and instead of collective bargaining? What we're going to get is dueling lawyers. My question to the railroads, is this a significant concern to you that it raises the necessity for you to have to respond with litigation if this bill should pass?
Yes, sir. The current process is collaborative. It involves all the parties. They deal with it together. The new process, if this were to pass, is that there would be a debate, and it would have to take place in court between whether Proposition 17, which precluded the legislature from acting on train crew, versus SB 730. And that would have to be in court. So instead of going through the collaborative process, we'd be litigating. We're not sitting here threatening litigation. I don't want that to be the impression. I'm just saying that's the only way we would be able to have that resolved.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Vice Chairman Harper?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on one of the things that was cited by the proponent, and that was kind of a characterization that trains are exploding, etc. And in a cursory search online, I'm having trouble finding a California train explosion, and in fact, looks like the only one that gets cited is about 40 years ago. There was an explosion of a train that was carrying munitions to soldiers in the Vietnam War. Are there any examples of exploding trains the last 10 years in California?
Not like where there are Bakken oil routes. California currently is not getting any Bakken. It's the projections from the California Energy Commission is that we'll have about a 25-fold increase in crude oil to California. So I would say where the crude oil goes is where you have the explosion so far. Just another point, the Federal Railroad Administration has issued at least 2 emergency orders regarding this. So I mean, I think we need to take it seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Thurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would ask those on this panel to just address whether or not, isn't this just a common sense safety measure? Because simply put, a long train carrying what could be very dangerous material should have more than one person monitoring the operation of that train in case something happens. And, you know, I'll just use my district as an example. My district is almost completely surrounded by railway. Some of that is passenger. As a matter of fact, I take that train almost every day to come here from, an hour and a half away. But those railways are shared with many industrial rail cars that are bringing all kinds of things. And we know that there's a growing movement to carry more crude by rail and other things that are combustible. I bet you that right now our safety statistics are better. I think that they are better than they were 5 years ago. But I would bet that at the same time, there's greater risk because of what we're also being asked to now transport at the same time. Why wouldn't we take these common sense safety measures and wouldn't we actually be creating more liability if, God forbid, there's an accident and something happens? People are going to say, oh, you only had one person operating that long train. Wouldn't we be better off saying we provided every measure that we could of safety? We took the highest standard of safety, and we said that long train with that load had 2 people operating that train.
Solomon Thurman, we take safety seriously for 2 reasons. One is because our people are on the trains, our employees. We're going through communities that we serve. And the other reason is if the train is interrupted or there's a service interruption, that hurts our business. So that's our factory floor where the trains run. Second is we're strictly liable. If anything happens, we pay for everything. There's no government that comes in and pays for it if the private railroads are involved in it. So we pay for everything. So we're motivated financially in every possible way to keep our trains as safe as possible. Right now we're running 2 crew on all over the roads. We're running 2 crew throughout California. But if this law is implemented, then we won't have the option of implementing new technology without the restraint of this law. The cooperative process has led us to better rail safety as a result of having a collaborative process. And that's what we're resisting here. We're resisting the idea that a state law and state laws that are going to change from state to state could change the way the crews operate. Changing crews is dangerous.
I understand. I appreciate your comments, and I am sensitive to your desire for flexibility. Lord knows I push my staff in ways for flexibility that would probably send them running from this building. The thing that drives me the most on this issue, though, and I appreciate that our government will pay if there's an incident, but I'm always fearful of the one thing. I don't want to be the one who has to say to the family that actually has experienced the loss, we're sorry and we're going to pay. I'm always feeling let's err on the side of more safety. And here's what the firefighters in my area have said. We are not prepared for the kind of devastation that could come from a derailment of crude by rail or similar materials in our area, in our state. And on that issue alone, they've asked us to take greater precaution, provide more training, and move slowly on the issue of crude by rail transport. On that issue alone, I would say, shouldn't we just take the safest measures that we can?
May I just address that? So you don't have to take my word for it. The safety record does speak for itself, but also in a hearing on train crew and train safety, very recent hearing, the head, Christopher Hart, who's the head of the National Transportation Safety Board, who is appointed by the president, he was asked by a California congressional member, it seems intuitive, they said, that 2 crew would be safer. And Mr. Hart said there is no evidence that 2 crew is safer over any of the modes. So we're not, and there's other studies that have been done that show there's no evidence of it. So passing a law where there's no policy background that's going to basically implement what we're already doing right now in the absence of additional technology, in the absence of additional discussion, just seems like it's just standing in the way to force us into a court situation as opposed to into the collaborative process we've been working in.
I don't have data to counter your position or your statement. As I said, though, I would not want to be the one who has to speak to a family and say, we had a choice about 1 or 2 and we chose 1. And so for the issues of just common sense safety, I'll be voting for this measure today. And that is not a reflection on what I think about the efforts that you and others have done to create even more safety. I commend you on that. But at the end of the day, I'm thinking about the family that we might have to have that awful conversation with. And that's why I'm going to vote for this today, and I urge my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you, Senator Thurman. Senator McCarty? You're fine? Okay. And Senator Patterson.
Thank you. And I appreciate the concern, but the scenario that I think it gets painted with this has to do with having to face the family. nobody wants to face the family. The railroads don't want to, I don't want to, you don't want to. But quite frankly, then the argument will be, we had 2, we should have had 3. So we have a present circumstance where there are 2. It was arrived at collective bargaining. If there were to be a change in that, it will take a long period of time through negotiation and through the demonstration of whether or not we are safer by moving from 2 to 1. So, I mean, I'm a little, I don't want to get too caught up in 2 or 3, 4, or 5. The fact of the matter is we've got 2. It arrived at collective bargaining. If that were to change, it would change over a long period of time and with a lot of data, a lot of information, and all of the railroad folks, the working folks, and all would be at the table wrestling through all of that. So for those reasons and for similar sympathy with my colleagues here with respect to safety, I've concluded a little differently, and so I don't think this gets us anywhere closer to safety. I do think it creates some potentials for litigation and wrestling matches that are going to be unnecessary. Where I think really does then get everybody's eye off the ball of safety and on to the ball of getting in the middle of labor negotiations, which I think becomes a problem. So, but appreciate the chance to.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. With that, any other questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to take it to a vote. We do have a motion. We need a second. Oh, yeah, we need it. We have a motion. We have a second. I know. So we have a second by Senator McCarty, motion by Senator Thurman. Madam Senator, would you like to close?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for your discussion. I would like to ask for your aye vote and just mention the fact that Assemblymember Thurman and I and Assemblymember McCarty and I share that line on which the risk is increasing and there is no silver bullet. This is one of the safety measures that really is not only common sense but ought to be in place. There are many others. There's positive train control. There's better tank cars to make sure that the safety standards for the tank cars, which are being delayed, need to be raised, and the level of preparedness of local communities has to be increased dramatically and paid for. It's really essential that all these things move forward so that we don't have to meet the families and try and explain why we weren't doing enough. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Wolk. So at this time, before we take the vote, I just want to make a few remarks. I know that we've heard a lot of dispute regarding Proposition 17 from the year 1964, and I believe that both sides have made their legal arguments, and at this point we're going to have to agree to disagree amongst the two sides. From my standpoint, having been the chairman of labor now for about 3 years, I've conducted hearings on railroad transport of commuters and the safety issues that have been involved there, where technology was heavily involved. There's been deaths involved in the Bay Area, and to this day, the question about engaging more technology, more human involvement in the safety procedures is something that is highly recommended in securing and protecting life throughout our state where railroads are transporting our folks. With the movement of goods, particularly dangerous goods, I think that can have a deadly impact to broader communities is something we have to be even more careful about. So I would err on the side of caution. I feel comfortable with this legislation here today. I do appreciate the arguments on both sides, but we as representatives of the public, we have to take every step to ensure the highest level of safety. If in the future data shows and indicates that the technology is ensuring 100% safety, and it's for a long period of time where the longitudinal tests can prove that, then I would be more comfortable revisiting the issue. So with that, I recommend an aye vote, and I would ask the Madam Secretary to please call the roll.
Motion is due pass to appropriations. Hernandez?
Aye.
Hernandez, aye. Harper?
No.
Harper, no. Chu? Chu, aye. Lowe? McCarty? McCarty, aye. Patterson? Patterson, no. Thurman? Thurman, aye.
Bill is out. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.